Moving forward, we have an interesting topic on beyond blockchain, create value from compliant self-sovereign identity in a globalized world. Ameya Bhagwat, Tech 5 Vice President Sales, is a seasoned sales professional with over 15 years of experience in business development and sales, with a proven track record in working with system integrators, solution providers, as well as end users in the government and private sectors, selling biometric solutions for L1 identity solution, Ameya, Crossmatch, and Next Biometrics. Ameya holds a degree in electronic engineering and a master in management studies. Mr. Ameya, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Faraz. Thanks once again, and good afternoon to all. It's my pleasure to be presenting during this Biometrics MENA Summit 2021. I will spend the next 10 minutes or so to give you an insight on how Tech 5 is solving the challenge of a compliant self-sovereign identity and looking beyond the blockchain. So let's address some of the more important questions, right? The first one being, is decentralized identity the key to post-COVID-19 digital era? As experts in the identity management domain, this is how we look at it. The pandemic has only accelerated the use of virtual channels for transactions and services that are being provisioned. The key driver for doing these transactions or giving these services is to securely ensure that the transaction is being authenticated. And one of the key aspects of this is to authenticate the identity of the stakeholder. There are two ways of doing so. So by verifying the identity against the centrally managed identity databases, or through verification of credentials that are managed by the stakeholders themselves, right? The concept of self-sovereign identity. What we essentially are saying is that you cannot really store the biometrics on a blockchain, and there has to be an alternate mechanism of storing the biometrics in a completely self-sovereign identity way. And the next slides will look at how do we do that. To spend a bit about the company, Tech 5 as an organization is headquartered in Geneva in Switzerland. We are dedicated to the design, development, and distribution of the biometrics-driven identity management solutions. We focus on government and private sectors with solutions that power civil ID, private ID, law enforcement, and some of the other solutions. Some of the facts about Tech 5, we have about 370 million plus active identities running on our platform currently across projects that we do. We have about 250,000 transactions that are being processed by our platforms every day. From a biometrics perspective, we focus on three core modalities, which are fingerprint, face, and iris. We also innovate a lot in this by bringing in the concept of deep learning or AI to increase the accuracy. And these are fully developed in-house, which is why we are also top tier or top ranked in NIST, which is an international body doing evaluations of these algorithms. Our worldwide presence looks like this. We have offices of R&D in US and Europe. We have software engineering in India and the US. And then we have sales teams spread across US, Switzerland, India, and Indonesia. What's our vision, right? As Tech 5, we basically aim to become the company that provides technology which puts the control of the digital identity usage in the hands of its owner. By that, what we mean is that we just don't want to issue a digital ID, which is decentralized in nature, but we also want the user to use that decentralized identity to avail services. And to do that, we have designed what we call as a T5 mobile ID. It's a technology that gives the individuals control of their digital identity. The next real question to answer is it secure to let individuals manage their own identities? At Tech 5, we believe we have the technology to do so. Let's look at some of the basic concepts, right, when it comes to credentials and the actors that are involved in it. So the key problem that the T5 mobile ID aims to solve is how does a service provider or a relying party for that matter can cost effectively obtain the proof that a claimant or the end user, right, who's presenting the particular credential is really the credential that matches with him or her, right? And as you see in the depiction, the credential becomes the center while there are three actors, the claimant or the end user, the service provider or the relying party, and the ID provider, which play key roles in the entire ecosystem. Let's look at individually with all of these, right? The claimant or the end customer who is actually availing the services is looking at having a control over who can verify the identity with the important factor of zero trust. What kind of information is being shared by the with the service provider and what can be accessed. When is this access made available, for how long? So the end user should have a control over that. And how one's identity is verified, right? Whether it's an online verification hitting any central database, or is it offline? As a service provider or a relying party, what should a service provider be able to do, right? They should be able to verify that the ID is genuine so that they know that a particular claimant is genuinely seeking a service. They want to trust the ID provider because without trusting the ID provider, there can be easily frauds that can be conducted by fake IDs. They should be able to connect the ID to the presenter so that there is a one-to-one matching and a binding that gets established. At the same time, after the identity is authenticated, they should be able to access the data that is needed. As an ID provider, they play a very important role because they have to ensure that the usage of the ID is extremely frictionless so that it drives more and more adoption. The ID provision itself should have security and privacy built ground up that establishes the trust. It should efficiently control the life cycle of the identities, which means that if there is any request for renewal or revocation of the decentralized identity, that should be handled by the ID provider. And at the same time, what is really important is generate revenues to sustain the program over a long period of time. So what we are saying is that the T5 mobile ID is a solution that can transform the digital identity into a decentralized identity by using a key aspect of biometrics, which can then be bound to the particular claimant. So what is a T5 mobile ID, right? It is essentially a digital credential that can be easily issued to a particular end user who can carry it on a phone or also in a printed format. And the credential can then be utilized to biometrically verify the end user, either in an online or an offline scenario by using just a smart device. What it also is basically a complete solution which involves the backend that can actually do the issuance and maintenance of the issued ID. But also on the front end, you have an easy verification solution using the normal smartphone, which can scan the issued ID and then ensure that apart from visual verification, you can also perform a biometric verification. So what it essentially does is it helps you to save the budget that you would have usually spent on huge infrastructure, personalization costs, logistics, distribution of a typical smart card, right? So imagine that you have a smart card but no chip on it, but instead of that, whatever data you used to store in the chip, except the OS, really gets stored on this particular mobile ID. So what it can eventually do is it can actually store your biometric data as well as some of the other PII data that can be linked and securely encrypt it and store it into this particular mobile ID. We firmly believe it's a game changer in the world of credentialing. And we believe that because it has been built ground up as a digital ID, as against some of the concepts of digital ID where a physical ID then gets converted into a digital format and then it can get scanned through NFC or some of the other interfaces. What you see on the screen is the high density machine readable code that has the capability to store the data. And like I mentioned, instead of using a chip, you can just print this on a piece of paper. You can carry it on a mobile phone. You can print it on a card and issue it. At the same time, it has got functionality to also encrypt the data inside it or even assign a passcode for certain blocks of data. So any particular verifying authority or a relying party can read only specified portions of this data unless they are authorized to read the entire stuff. So what are the enablers, right? What we believe that as the overall solution, right? What we're trying to promote over here is, whereas it is becoming critical to verify the identity online by service providers before actually you are issuing a credential. You need not necessarily always store the biometrics on a blockchain. In fact, while deployment can be a different challenge, we are saying that the biometrics should always be kept independent of which blockchain you are trying to host it on. And the way we are able to achieve this is through the T5 cryptograph. So the high density machine readable code is what we call the T5 cryptograph, which is able to store the personal data and biometric information. But it also offers you a completely offline solution for your mobile authentication needs, right? We are experts in biometrics, so that's where we are able to provision really highly accurate fingerprint and face matching algorithms, which can be used for verifying the particular claimant. And at the same time, if you want to just visually verify the identity, we are also able to compress the face image and store it inside the cryptograph. With the PKI infrastructure coming into picture, we can also make sure that only authorized service providers are able to unlock the data that is stored inside the mobile ID or the digital ID or the decentralized ID that's issued. And to counter frauds, we have also provisioned liveness detection features, which are able to run liveness checks on face and fingerprint capture. In fact, we have gone a step further. And if you want to use this in a completely self-service model, you do not even need to have any third-party device, right? Your smartphone can become your device to acquire your face. And to a next extent, where the innovation comes into picture, is we are able to even scan your fingerprints using your smartphone, and it never leaves your phone. It will match it with the data that's stored inside this particular identity and ensure that your overall privacy and security is maintained. So that's about it from my side. Thank you for this opportunity. 10 minutes, really short time to explain you in great detail about what we have. I would invite you to our booth. We have a virtual booth for this summit. At the same time, we have a YouTube channel. You can go there and see some of the videos which will give you some more details.
Mr. Ameya, thank you. Thank you for this great insights that you provided. And these insights and content that you provided stimulated several questions. So let me start. How do you protect your identity privacy in blockchain?
Correct. So that's what I mentioned, that we, when we talk about biometrics and identity, right, the blockchain does not really allow you to store any PII. It is usually stored in off-chain storage environment. What we are trying to pitch over here is essentially the carrier of the PII data, including your biometric, becomes the P5 cryptograph, right, which is the high density machine readable code. So you're not storing it anywhere on a central location. That identity gets issued to you as an ID holder, and you can carry it along with you on your phone, or you can carry it on a piece of paper, right? So it never leaves you.
Okay, thank you. Other question is another question. Are you storing the fingerprint image in the sensor? And if yes, how secure is this?
Exactly. So we are not storing anything on the sensor. We are storing everything inside the high density cryptograph, which is encrypted, and we can have various levels of encryption depending on the level of security that the particular use case requires. The key to understand here is none of the biometric data is getting stored anywhere on the phone or any of the central location or any sensor or anything. Whether it's face, compressed face image, face template, face or fingerprint biometrics, all of it gets stored inside the cryptograph. And that's the beauty of the solution, right? The user has the confirmation that this is not going to leave me as long as I have the paper or I have the card or the phone.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Ameya, for this content, for attending this session. Thank you a lot.
Thanks a lot.